I should have given you a heads up a little bit before that, but we can go ahead and maybe Don and Wanda, if y'all want to call us back to.
The meeting will be called back to order.
So it looks like what we want to do here is to begin talking about what the subcommittees should look like, and then identifying the type of people that we want to be on those subcommittees. So the first thing here is establishing the subcommittee. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to throw it out there. Do we have any comments or questions from what we did earlier? So everybody is as confused as I am. They don't know what the question actually is, right? Okay. Now, I think they did a really good job this morning, and I'd like to thank them for the information that they gave us this morning to get us started. So here's my question to you. Where do we really think we need to begin with establishing subcommittees? And I think that'll be our first discussion is do we begin with large groups that are cross-discipline? Do we begin with smaller groups that are more specific, et cetera? And so we need to have that discussion now. So I'm going to open that up to discussion. Ideas, questions, comments?
Hi, this is Lou. I thought we could find the one that gives us the number of programs that are across the state, and then maybe we could pick out some of the programs that we feel are duplicative and find out how they are in the field of study. That would be one area, and then maybe another one is to go to the business and industry and say, what commonalities do you have in your areas that feed into these programs? To just kind of help us try and narrow down which ones we want to focus on.
What do y'all think of that?
Lou, is this the chart right here that you're talking about?
That's what I'm looking for. I think it is.
It's
Which
this
page?
chart right here. Right. It's the number of declared majors.
There. That's
That was in the packet, right?
Right. It's in the packet.
In the agenda packet.
It's in the.
There was, yeah. There was also one that had the number of programs. That the small one? Okay.
Looks like this.
Is there already another committee at the coordinating board looking at the registered nursing programs?
Well, what we have is there's a committee, and I believe, Jan, maybe help me out. I think it's House Bill 3078. Is that the number as you recall?
That committee is nearing the end of its work to have a report go to the legislation, and it's been looking at the core courses that are true across all RN programs. So they've done a lot of survey work looking at curriculum and core curriculum.
The core technical courses or just the core academic courses?
The prerequisite courses for nursing.
And you know, a conversation here is that we believe, you know, here meaning us, the coordinating board, as we were planning for all this, is we think that this committee should not tackle nursing initially because we need to wait until that group does its report, or I think we would just be plowing some of the same ground that's already been plowed.
Yeah,
But as Jan said, I believe that report is due to the legislature either in November or January as we get kind of headed towards session. But that nursing could be a conversation that you come back around to at some time in the future.
So what we're suggesting is that we go through this list and maybe select out some of the larger programs that are in clusters. Is that correct? And starting with those, start our discussion with those. Is that correct? All right. So we need to identify commonalities then. And I think one of the areas that would be easiest to start talking about might be the medical imaging programs, including rad tech, sonography. What else is on here?
Cardiovascular,
Yeah.
nuclear medicine.
Yeah, nuclear medicine. Cardiovascular technology is one of the imaging programs.
Diagnostic medical sonography.
Diagnostic medical sonography. Nuclear med, rad. You see any others in that area?
The only thing you wouldn't want to add there is the radiation therapist. That they're, I think, substantially different radiation therapy as opposed to the diagnostic aspect of all the imaging. So you don't want to include radiation therapy there, but the rest of the, I agree with the rest of the groups.
All right. So what we're talking about is cardiovascular technology, diagnostic medical sonography, and sonographic and ultrasound tech. As the nuclear med? No, that's what you just said, wasn't it?
No, he said radiation
Okay.
therapist.
So not nuclear med, sorry.
Yes, nuclear med is part of.
Yes or no?
You say nuclear medicine in or out?
Nuclear medicine in with radiology and diagnostic sonography.
All right. Nuclear med, radiologic technology, science, and radiographer. And was there another one? It's not on this list, but I wonder if we shouldn't be talking also about MRI.
Probably falls under radiologic technology, and it's a post-degree certification.
All right. So that gives us 1, 2, 3. I see 4 zip codes. What am I missing?
Well, zip codes, they're,
Oh, it's 5. No, I'm not respiratory. Who we got? All right. Let's read them out again. We've got cardiovascular technology, diagnostic medical sonography, nuclear medical technology, and radiologic technology. Or- 4. 4 is what I have. Are there any others we need to add to that group? All right. And
so. Radiologic technology, medical radiology technology, nuclear med. It's not here, but it's. On the other.
I think they're in multiple places. Yep. And I think the reason we're talking about these is because it gives us a place of commonality to start with a larger group. To try, because we're going to have to break this down into manageable chunks. So if we start talking about everything at the same time, we're going to be talking about all different kinds of things because, as you know, respiratory is as different from imaging program as surgical technology is from nursing, et cetera. And if we don't have some kind of commonality, it's going to be really difficult for us to have a conversation that stays kind of on track in a stream. So, all right. So what do we want to call this? We want to call this a
Medical imaging would be a pathway. Medical imaging, all of this can be clumped into that, right? Or diagnostic medical imaging.
Diagnostic medical imaging.
I think we're working on both of them. I think we're working off both of them. So the diagnostic medical imaging subcommittee? All right.
And this is why our recorder, and it's very important, I mean, Pam is working on getting this, but we need to really make sure that we get this right, because I'm a little bit confused myself, but as long as y'all are okay. I'm always confused, don't worry about me. Here, I'll say it before anybody else can. But as long as y'all are all on the same page and it works for you, I'm good. But
Just for clarification on this, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 zip codes identified. On this, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, did you? Which one was it?
Radiologic technology, science, and radiography.
Right, we have that one.
Yeah,
We
have.
have that one,
Diagnostic medical sonography,
yeah.
medical radiological technology, science.
We have
Yeah, yeah.
medical radiology, here we go.
The rationale is, the ones that we have clumped together is diagnostic in nature. Radiation would be, imaging is involved, but they're therapeutic as well. So that's,
Let me repeat what I have, too, to make sure my notes are the same. So the subcommittee would be Diagnostic Medical Imaging Subcommittee. The first one, first area would be Cardiovascular Technology, Technologist. Second, Diagnostic Medical Sonography, Sonographic Ultrasound. Nuclear Medical Technology, Technician. The fourth one is Radiologic Technology, Science, and Radiography. Okay.
I'm just giving you an observation. The radiation therapy, it's actually a baccalaureate, master's level, dosimetry and all those, and that's why you see only very few programs. And if they do at all a 2-year program, it's probably a 2+2 type of thing. And I just don't see radiation therapy being part of this. That's the reason I suggested it.
Yeah, I agree. There's a difference between the therapy area and the imaging area. And we should probably kind of stick with one manageable group to start with. We may find that there's enough between the two that's common to actually bring them together too. Because honestly, I don't know any more than you do about where we're going, right? So we may find that as we go forward that we want to bring those two groups together and have them discuss what they think a program of study ought to look like. Because there may be enough common between them to have an entire first year that's the same. But that would be a discussion that is probably best suited for them. What we want to do is to kind of identify, I think, and somebody jump in here if you see otherwise, is to identify what we think is the characteristics of an area that define what a subcommittee will look like. Does that make sense? I'm not sure I said that right. Right? So I think that's our goal right now. That's our first goal, is to start looking at what do we think that a diagnostic medical imaging subcommittee will look like. And if we can hammer it out with this first group, it'll be easier to do with the next group, and the next group, and the next group. Right? So what's our next step? We've identified where we want to start. So do we want to identify the different subcommittees, or do we want to talk about what a subcommittee should look like within this discipline?
I think
Go ahead.
I think we should identify all of our subcommittees first, and then the clusters for each cluster.
All right. And I think we're going to end up with some outliers, some that are not going to fit into a cluster. That's, there are always those that walk to a different beat, so. All right, so that was my big shot, was the imaging. See, I stole the easy one. Abe and I talked about this earlier. We stole the easy one, so you guys are up for the next one.
It's an outlier, that's it.
There's not a hygiene in here?
It's hygiene and assisting.
Yeah, it's hygiene.
It has to be both.
Yeah, that's both
Because
together.
there are no certificate hygiene programs. There are only dental assisting programs that are certificates. So that would be it.
Well, but it's a cluster. 4 courses and at least one semester between the two.
You can find core courses between dental hygiene and any allied health program. We have to take, we've got basic core, English, speech, psychology, sociology. You could do that. You could do anatomy and physiology. But there's really and truly nothing in the dental hygiene curriculum other than your anatomy and physiology and your microbiology that would coordinate. We're limited to 68 hours, so most of our programs don't even have a medical terminology course. That could be a commonality. It's going to stand alone.
And I think that brings up another question. This is a question for the coordinating board. Maybe Gary can help us with this. Are we addressing the full scope of a degree or certificate plan in the subcommittees, including the ACGM courses required?
Excuse me. What we were talking over there is we're going to see if we don't have this document with all the declared majors electronically. It's kind of weird. That computer's actually not connected to our network, but we're going to see if we can get it, and if so, we're going to project this, and that way we can color code them, make sure we get our groupings or whatever. And so that's what we were talking about over there. It's not that we were not paying attention, but this committee and its subcommittees can make recommendations about WECM courses, about additions, deletions, archive, all that kind of stuff. And then you can also do the same thing on the ACGM courses. But since the ACGM courses are the university transfer courses, and we're talking largely about AAS degrees, we've got to kind of consider that. But yes, you can, you can talk about pretty much almost anything. I think we're all going to try to keep you between the tracks of education, but pretty much anything you want to discuss, you can go forward on. And if there are appropriate recommendations for ACGM courses, yes, we can move those forward to that committee. Just this committee can't change those courses. And you can understand that we couldn't have every committee, let's fix biology, and then another committee come in and say, let's fix, we would be all over the place. But
I think one of the things that you need to be very careful with any of these programs are your accredited programs. Dental hygiene, for instance, is very prescriptive, and they tell us exactly what core courses that we have to have in that. So there's not a lot of flexibility with that. And I think that's something that when you're talking about dividing these into committees, I think you have to look at that is what's their governing body. And if, like RadTech has their own governing body, so they've got very prescriptive, guidelines also.
Then maybe the committees that we'd be talking about with those areas would be the committees with business and industry, to bring in dental hygiene and then find
No,
out what's happening at the secondary.
Business and industry has nothing to do with the accreditation standards.
I understand that, but I thought that the purview or the reason for this advisory committee was to see how we could build pathways and bridges between secondary and at least community colleges, maybe on to bachelor's and master's.
Right, but what
So if
I'm
there's
saying-
discussions in the subcommittee.
Right, you can have those discussions, but the accrediting bodies aren't going to change. No matter what we say here, they're not going to change their requirements.
I'm not suggesting you change the accrediting bodies or the community colleges. I'm suggesting that we reach out to the secondary programs and have them look at what they're teaching those in high school that could dovetail and focus in that career pathway.
Right.
That's what I'm saying, that's where
Yes,
that
that's where
particular
that-
one that stands
yes.
alone could reach down into that. That's what I meant.
Yeah.
Not that we would change the.
No.
'Cause I
Okay.
know some of them are very prescriptive.
They're very prescriptive.
Yeah, and you'll find that some of them are very prescriptive and some of them are not. And so my question was to an area such as respiratory care where they don't specify academic courses for respiratory care, they just specify areas that you have to have A and P, and you have to have math and those kinds of things. So are those subcommittees then going to discuss discipline content, or are they going to discuss discipline content combined with academic courses that are required for the degree?
I mean, I don't have a predetermined answer to that. That's really and truly y'all and the subcommittees as appropriate. The conversation that y'all were having, if we go back to statute, and I paraphrase this, it was in one of the slides, but it talks about committees composed of like other CTE experts and stuff like that, and I forget the exact language. But to me, the subcommittee could be composed of almost anybody adjacent to the discipline is perhaps the best way to phrase it. So, for example, if there is a accrediting agency and they have representation in Texas, or if they want to participate nationally or whatever, and it's appropriate, we could invite them to participate. And it's at the end of page 2, which is the third page in the packet. And I told you we're building this plane as we're flying. One of the things I've learned is we need to put page numbers on the bottom of our pages, and I already wrote that note. And so hopefully when we move forward, but it's B on the bottom of the statute. The board with assistant advisory committees, secondary education, post-secondary business industry, other state agencies or licensing bodies, career and technical education experts. And so, I think the purpose of the legislation is to get the appropriate people to have the conversation. But as I said a minute ago, do we really envision one of these subcommittees coming in and talking about changing math 13, 14, college algebra? I think the answer is probably no. But if there are recommendations that are appropriate, then we can send those back to the ACGM committee. But we think most of the conversation will be more of WECM discipline-specific conversations. And I don't know that I specifically said this. In most of our WECM rubrics, disciplines out there, maybe I shouldn't say most, in many of our WECM disciplines out there, we have 50 to 100 courses is common. I'm getting some head shaking. And with a 60 semester credit hour limitation of associate degrees, you've got room for 45 hours in an associate degree, with the few exceptions that we gave you the list. That gives you room for 12 to 15 courses. And you know, I said, and y'all shook your heads affirmatively for the most part, that in WECM, if we have 40 to 50 courses or more, most courses have a contact hour range that many of them are like from 48 contact hours to 144. And I'll share, I kind of have this in my head because I was looking at this one time. I was looking at a welding course, and I don't remember what number the course was, but this was a fall and spring, I think it was 2 years ago. It was offered 58 times during that fall and spring semester around the state. It actually had a bimodal distribution with a lot of colleges offering it around 60 hours or something like that, and a lot of colleges offering it around 140 or something like that. That's not the same educational experience. I mean, there's no way that those students, and from a business and industry point of view on a transcript, and they see welding 1409 or whatever the number was, an employer might hire 2 students, one from your college and one from their college, and it's like, you know, that person's twice as good as that person, and maybe it's just because they got, you know, twice as many contact hours. And you know, we're not presupposing to say, well, we're going to limit it to 48. That's why we have the groups here talking. But part of the conversation is trying to right-size WECM and get the essential knowledge, skills, and business so that business and industry can look at students. And as Rex said, students can go across the state. And so that's really and truly what we're doing. And I guess my last thing, and I am trying to be quiet the second half so that, you know, y'all are rolling up your sleeves on this. But, you know, I've said this a couple of times. It's not a WECM review course process that we're undertaking. We're really trying to go to a higher level and look at program, but then WECM is a piece of this. So did I answer your question, Don?
Yeah, I have a question, and this goes back to Garrett. Okay, we're looking at 2 different sheets here, okay? This one has programs on it that are not associate degree programs.
Right.
So we don't want to look at those, right?
Right.
So it would be better to look at this one that has the AAS.
And you know, as I kind of said when I went through that sheet, and you know, we discussed this, and Dwayne, toggle back to the other one, if you will, for just a second. You know, when I kind of went through it briefly, I said it has psychology at the beginning of it, and we're not going to tackle psychology because psychology is a transfer academic pathway. And so, yes, that's, you know, we need to be more focused on the AAS degrees, but then, and so I don't want to specifically limit us to only AAS degrees, because LVN is an example, are certificate programs, and so that's in play. And there might be, we haven't studied it to that level, and again, some of this is y'all's conversation, and y'all need to help us. There might be some of these disciplines that are built around AS degrees, but they're really and truly workforce-based degrees. But it's, you know, might, if, maybe. And so those are conversations that we see that this group needs to work their way through. But Lori, to your question, no, we are not going to take on psychology. That's you know, that's not where we're going.
Okay.
But what we've done is we've tried to pull this up so we can start color coding and getting the groups together. And so whichever list y'all want to work off of, Dwayne is going to try to be a scribe as we fly. Do what now? Yes. Scribing? Well, it's probably in the education and teaching career cluster, probably. Oh, medical scribe, okay.
I just wanted to support Carol on the dental hygiene. CODA is probably, CODA and nursing accreditors are the only 2 that is commissioned by DOE. And so they seem to be a lot more prescriptive in the curriculum than other KHEP type of programs. Having said that, if our charge is to bring pathways from secondary to 2 years, and then also between 2-year programs within the state. I would say dental services should stay as it is, as a subcommittee, but you have other things under dental services, like dental assisting, dental lab, I think, and other things. So if you put all of those other things together and then look at secondary to 2-year pathway, and also between 2-year programs, I think that might be something that we could look at as a subcommittee.
All the different ones. So then that would include.
Yeah, and I think one of the things we'll see as we go forward with the subcommittees is we may actually see connections between different disciplines that we hadn't seen before, that they hadn't seen, and you may see them begin to coalesce into a general kind of a health science basis for a program to study to branch out from that then. And dental services may come into that as well.
So you have dental hygiene as well on the cluster 8. You have dental hygiene as well as dental assisting.
Should be also dental lab.
Dental lab.
Should be those 3.
And Carol, on the business and industry people for that subcommittee, manufacturers of dental, materials.
Crowns, bridges, things
Yeah,
like
all
that,
this,
prosthesis. Yeah, you could do that. Of course, private practitioners, from the dental community, dentists, hygienists themselves. Hygienists and assistants, I'm going to sound really ugly, but dentists may be on that subcommittee, but I would say that it needs to be predominantly hygiene and assisting because hygiene is such a different animal than a dental assisting. And the dentist is not always aware of the type of education that the hygienist has.
To put it very simply, it's once more preventive.
Yes,
And
hygiene's
educational.
much more preventive. They still, unfortunately, it's a kind of a lack of education sometimes at dental schools, as they don't realize the education that the hygienist has. They don't realize it really is a 2-year degree and it's very difficult. They don't get it, so they're not always the best judge of decisions that need to be made about the educational program.
And, maybe I'm wrong, and I don't know, Dwayne, if you know this, but you may know this, but don't most colleges have a dental hygiene program and/or a dental assisting program? Aren't they separate?
They're separate.
Well,
They're
yeah.
completely separate,
Yeah.
but there are many hygiene programs that don't have a dental assisting program with
yeah.
them.
Yeah, that's my point. You could have one or the other or both.
You can have one or the other or both, yes.
Right. And so maybe you might be trying to group something that maybe isn't appropriate to group. I don't know. I mean, it's y'all's conversation. But if we, and I don't know if I specifically said this or not, but by statute, committees are limited to 24 people as our subcommittees. And so we can potentially invite up to 24 people. And so, if we're trying to force a group and we think we're going to invite 12 and 12, and the left side's going to talk to the left side and the right side's talking to the right side, I'm not sure we're accomplishing anything. But if a group can have the conversation, or do we need to do 2 separate, not a subcommittee per se. I mean, that's, sometimes trying to get things together, it just doesn't work. Dwayne, can you go back to that career cluster page? I don't know if you still have it up or not. It was open a second ago. Nah. Do you know where it is, Elizabeth? Okay. Wow. And I don't. I guess that's going to build in a second over there. Now go to the bottom of it. Go back to where it was. Is where I wanted. Okay, see, maybe y'all can see this. I don't know if you can or can't. Oh, he just blew it up a little bit. But it talks about a career, a common career technical core. And Don asked me this question, and, you know, I'm gonna get real educator speak here. I mentioned GIPWE earlier. That's the guidelines for workforce programs at the community colleges. But in GIPWE, we talk about a career foundation core. And when I described the oak tree, I described maybe a first year experience, and maybe the tree has that common experience. So, you know, is there a possible common core, you know, here? Or are they separate? And so I'm, you know, offering you this definition. Maybe that will help you as you frame your decisions about what to group. If there's a certain amount of commonality, you know, potentially even if it's a semester, you know, even if it's a semester, if all the students could do the same first semester in this area, and then they begin to branch, you know, and if a college had both programs, then they could, you know, help the students make decisions potentially. And of course, if a college only had one program, it would still be the same. And so that's just kind of a definition to share with you, and maybe it'll help frame your conversation.
And the thing that I got out of what we were just discussing, not everything is necessarily going to go together, right? That's the first thing. But the second thing I heard several different groups mentioned as having a stake in this. And so what we're looking for is, if we're talking about a diagnostic medical imaging subcommittee or a dental subcommittee, whatever it is, we're talking about identifying the stakeholders and bringing them together in a committee, in a subcommittee, to discuss what that discipline should look like. And so stakeholders that I heard, of course, the program coordinator, directors, the content area experts, the accreditors, potential stakeholders, the high schools, of course, because we're trying to align with the high schools, and the four-year colleges, we're trying to align on both ends, and employers. And so I see those as the primary stakeholders here. You guys see others?
Just a comment to make from looking at some of the information we presented from the employer standpoint. I think it's important that we kind of follow that whole pipeline of from the high school to the associate degree to more advanced degrees, but not to miss the outcome piece of it, of what's important to that employer. You know, this one course may be really important to you because you think that's what needs to be on there from an educational perspective, but when you talk to the employer, they go, yeah, no, we don't need that skill or that particular course. So I think it's important from when you put those committees together that you focus on that end result being that job skill to get them employed. It needs to be included in there, and that's something I haven't really heard us talk about from the employer standpoint, to make sure that we get them to focus on the job skill and maybe not necessarily the course. I get accreditation, those things you have to for licensure and things, but if it's not, then make sure it's something that the employer requires to hire as a new employee. So just a comment in there.
If I can jump in here for just a second, I'll share a story. And Sally, since you went there, and I'm just going to go ahead and tell her I gave her $20 at lunch to get her to bring that up, but let her off the hook. Before this statute existed, and before I came here, we were working in a project in energy, and that's really where that tree model came from. And we had a group of industry people come together, and one of the energy people said that we had the majority of megawatts of power production in the state of Texas represented in the room. So we had really tried to go across the state and get a big group. And we did exactly what you're suggesting. We asked them, you know, what is it that an employer needs to be for an entry-level position? I'm not saying that y'all haven't and you don't. Okay, I'm relating the story. But anyway, we then printed out probably several hundred WECM courses in the industrial, mechanical, all those IT NT, EL, PT, you know, a bunch of that stuff. There's a ton of them in Weckham. And we gave them a stack about like that. So in the first meeting was actually out in Tyler, and we had the big sticky notes, and they were writing these learning outcomes and kind of grouping them together globally. And so we turned those into table tents at the next meeting, and we gave them all the Weckham courses, and they took them and they started sorting them. You know, this goes there, that goes that, and that kind of stuff. And we also made a table called Other, and guess where the majority of the courses wound up? And as a general rule, business and industry said, you're way too specific, you're way down here, you really need to bring it back up here. And you know, that's one of the reasons why was spent time as we laid the foundation of this meeting of trying to make sure that we have multiple constituencies, not just the community college folks, but trying to bring the secondary folks. I mentioned Diane and myself and others at TWC, and I mentioned TWIC and the governor's office. We're all engaged in this conversation at the state level, but then we've got to get it all the way down to y'all, and that's why business and industry is here, and that's why business and industry needs to be such an important piece of the conversation. And so, you know, I know you're not saying we're not going to exclude business and industry. I know that's not something that's been said, but how do we make it as inclusive as possible? And we listen. And then I'm going to say one other thing, and I bet y'all, the community college folks have seen this as well, that at our local advisory committees, I've observed this to where it's like, yeah, but they really need to know this skill, and I can teach that for you on Thursday night. And and so what we've got to figure out is that really and truly a relevant, important skill, or is it something else? And that's a lot of the conversations that we're trying to have and we're trying to get here.
Everybody looking at me.
We appreciate that.
Yeah. So going back to that point, I see our members of the communities of interest as being, again, the discipline content specialist, potentially the accreditors, the high schools, the four-year colleges, and the employers. And I've got 5 groups here. What other groups would we want to, would we need to include? And this is for the various disciplines and subcommittees, right?
Licensing bodies, like the BON. You know, most of our programs require some type of licensure, and that's going to be another driving force as to where we go with the courses. Dental hygiene, for instance, we cannot give injections in the state of Texas, one of 3 states that cannot do it. Our students are tested over that on the national board that they have to take. So, ergo, we have to teach the theory. And so your employer will say, oh, well, you don't need that content. Well, yes, we do. So we run into some of that with our allied health programs.
And I wonder if we shouldn't think about professional organizations as well. And I will occasionally go back to what I know, which is surgical technology. So forgive me if I'm not pushing them, I'm just saying that's what I know. The Association of Surgical Technologists, which is the professional organization for surgical technology, actually creates the curriculum for surgical technology. They have a curriculum guide that every program is supposed to follow. And so potentially we should probably be talking about some professional organizations as well. I don't know how it fits into every organization, but certainly in surgical technology it would fit.
Dan, did you have any secondary school in the mix?
Yes, Mm-hmm.
Representation from secondary school?
we do. Like our HOSA organizations, 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 We have those that I think we should bring into the mix. Our Skills USA, they do some health science.
Others? So we're thinking that our subcommittees are beginning to look like a group of up to 24 people. That includes the discipline content specialist, the accreditors, high schools, employers, four-year colleges, licensing organizations, professional organizations, HOSA, and Skills USA, where they apply. Yeah. Anything else?
I serve on the NCLEX committee, and that's the National Licensing Exam for Nurses, and every 3 years, we reevaluate to see that what's being tested is what's needed in practice for new nurses, and they go through a process. I could bore you all in an hour. But I think having new people who are working in the profession to talk about what they are doing most and what's most important will help you to know the product you're trying to produce through any kind of education program.
Yeah. Recent employed graduates.
And you know, Don, and really all of you as a whole, I mean, these groups, you know, that, yes, it makes sense. We kind of have an understanding of that. But then also part of this is, like, y'all mentioned different accreditors, different accrediting agencies. If you could help us with contacts as appropriate, or tell us the name, you know, so whatever dental hygiene, if I heard CODA a while ago, I don't know if that's it or not, but you know, do they have Texas chapters? Do they have national chapters? And if you know the contact, then we can, you know, part of this, give us the contact and we'll push it. But, I mean, of course, getting it to the colleges and the high schools and stuff is easy. And even the regional service centers, we have those linkages. We can make that happen. Getting to business and industry, if there's a trade group, that helps. You know, and obviously knowing the trade group name or the accreditation name is the first thing that helps. But if you have the contact information, that saves us time, and then we make sure we get it to the right person. And of course, once we send the nomination process and all that kind of stuff, you're welcome to forward, share, disseminate, all that kind of stuff. Because we are, you know, I think y'all are saying this, just like we introduced it, we want to get the right people to the table. And I mean, trust me, it'd been a whole lot easier on us if we just brought in 24 people and said, here, y'all do all these right quick and call it good, right? But we think we know that's not viable.
I think where we might have a problem on these subcommittees is exactly with the accrediting bodies in the licensure group, because many of them are national, and we are not going to have access to them at the local level. But if you defer to your community colleges, in this case, who are operating underneath their accrediting standards and guidelines, those would be the people that could answer your questions. I think trying to get hold of an accrediting body or a licensing body is just, we can't do it. I don't believe, in the first place, they'd even do it, and most of them aren't housed in Texas. So defer to those people that work directly with them, and that would be your programs within the community colleges that are accredited.
I agree with Sue Ann. That's a very valid point. I don't believe CODA would even return your message, to be real honest with you, because even as a program director, if I call and want some type of, will you answer this question, I get the runaround. So I think what they would say is that these are in our guidelines. The courses that we require are in our guidelines. It's how you choose to apply those as long as they're there. So I think, and I don't know that Texas State Board of Dental Examiners would be any more help.
And then I heard somebody throw out accredited programs. We limit it to accredited programs?
You mean
Accredited programs. I heard somebody say accredited programs.
that is a difference because you can have a program that is. So if you go to them for that information,
Yeah, but my question is, do we limit the subcommittee membership to people from accredited programs?
I don't think so. I think you should have a mix of both. Unless it's a requirement, paramedics are required now to have accreditation. But if they're not required, then no, there should be a mixture. I think you should have recognition of both of them.
An example would be EMT. EMT certification is state, pretty much. You don't have any national, but paramedic can opt to have the national accreditation, but there are many state certified. So that's the official certification licensure for them. So you shouldn't limit, I agree, limit it to just accredited programs.
I think it's going to depend upon the profession that you're looking at. Dental hygienists cannot be licensed unless they graduate from an accredited program. So,
What's next?
I wanted to confirm, you discussed the Dental Services Subcommittee, is that correct?
I think that's what we're talking about, yeah.
And all of you included assisting, lab, and hygiene.
All right, and so are we in agreement that we need to just skip the accreditors and the licensing bodies? Or does somebody have a different opinion on that?
for example, as far as the. May end up with one by accident or by default, so you don't.
but typically, if they're a member of a visiting site team, they won't be serving in that capacity on this committee. They would be serving as whatever program they teach in. Because I don't think they can do that. I don't think they can speak for the accrediting body.
I was giving an example of somebody that is actually on the board.
Oh, yeah, we're not talking about excluding somebody because of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not talking about excluding somebody because they are on the board. We're talking about not actually having an official designated spot on one of these subcommittees for the accreditors or for the licensing bodies.
It seems to me that if a program is accredited, those people representing that kind of program are going to know if we're getting outside of the rules.
And we can do our best efforts to reach, if it's a Texas group, it's probably easier, I agree. If it's a national group, we'll just have to see if they want to allocate resources to it. And then there may be a certain amount of conversation. I think several of you have said that, should we maybe ask them if they want to maybe be a member of the subcommittee, or would it be better served to be more of an ex officio kind of thing, or just observe? Because as has been discussed several different times, so many of the times, the various accreditors don't want to get into that you need a 3-hour course in this. They want to get more of that's the standard, and so we. As the statute says, and as I think I've said, those may be experts that are appropriate, but then, the level of it may be, and it varies, because some entities, they might willingly agree, yes, you need 3 hours here and 9 hours there and that, and then some might just say, no, you just got to teach it, which is where most of them are. And because we had conversations with most of them when we were implementing the 60-hour stuff. We tried to call and talk to them and kind of figure out where they were. And And we talked to them.
And they wouldn't commit, would they?
Do what now?
They wouldn't commit, would they?
No.
So what we're looking at now, if we're taking the accreditors and the licensing organizations out, I now have discipline content specialist, high schools, employers, four-year colleges, professional organizations, should we say as appropriate? OSA and Skills USA as appropriate. And then, for lack of a better term, new people in the profession who are recent employed graduates. So that gives us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 groups as the communities of interest. Y'all are very quiet. You're very quiet. All right, so, and do we think that this is an appropriate model for other subcommittees beyond dental hygiene? So once we've identified our clusters, then we can say that this is the model that we want to use for those different areas. Oh, all right. So that, I guess that brings us down to, back to where we were to start with, identifying the clusters.
The subcommittees, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So we have diagnostic medical imaging subcommittee, and we have the dental, we just call it dental subcommittee? Or dental services, is that what we're calling it? We have 2.
We may have a third one, occupational therapy, physical therapy, and rehab and therapeutic professions.
Those do go together, and you can call them rehabilitative services.
What was that?
You could call them rehabilitative services.
Is that where this somatic bodywork related therapeutic services would go? I don't know what that program is.
Yeah.
Massage therapy, okay.
If you look at the PowerPoint on the screen, you'll see the career clusters from 2012 and the main pathways. And I think you're following those: therapeutic services, diagnostic, health informatics, which we haven't talked about yet, support services, which of course I believe dental would fall under that, and the biotechnology. Just wanted to bring that out to you. Those are the major pathways within the cluster.
And that may be our next conversation, once we identify these clusters. How then do these clusters come together in those five groupings? So do we have, between 2 different clusters in diagnostic services, is there enough to bring those 2 groups together to talk about program of study? So we have now diagnostic medical imaging subcommittee, we have a dental services subcommittee, and we have a rehabilitative services subcommittee.
And those are, again, OTPT.
I don't know what somatic is.
I don't know if massage therapy would be involved in rehab per se. Restorative, maybe. We all need it.
It can be.
It can be, yeah.
is that one that we could kind of put to the side? Because it can be used in both rehabilitative and therapeutic. So is that one we want to put to the side and see where it best fits once we get to that, yeah, till that next subcommittee? I'm just not sure.
I think that these may actually be sub-clusters, because eventually, I think it would be a good idea to put them all under that, so we may find all of those under therapeutic services. So it may fall out by itself, but it might still fall up under the larger cluster. You're probably right.
I think that's already been done, hasn't it? Isn't that what the career cluster is all about? Aren't occupational therapy and those things listed under therapeutic services?
That information is in your packet. I think just after the statute, well, the rules, the statute and the rules. It's the first Excel spreadsheet in the packet that's all stapled together.
Very cheap. Very big.
And you can kind of see some of this grouping of the various broad categories that are up there on the board, and then the column on the left in the printout we provided for you, you can kind of see as we're moving from the larger to the smaller, and then even once you get to the smaller piece of this, some of it is even, might even still be divided at another level. And so, you know, and I think one of the conversations that maybe you need to kind of think as you organize this is, you know, we gave you some of the degree areas and the number of programs in the state, and I just happened to turn to the radiologic technology science, and I'm pretty sure that's the rad tech stuff, you know. And I mean, I just flipped the page, and so part of this, as you slice and dice it, part of it, what is it that already has programs that are pretty well defined across the state, you know. And I kind of made this comment about dental hygiene and dental assisting, you know. Is there grouping there, or does it need to be divided? But then it's almost the same thing with some of this other stuff. Can you bring this group together and explore it collectively, or does it need to be sliced smaller? And so, as I talk about this, and as you go through your conversation, you don't necessarily have to stop at those career pathway levels because they're larger, you know. And so that's part of your conversations. And then a program of study is maybe I shouldn't say the smallest piece of it, but for our argument, I think it is the smallest piece of it. And so health science as a whole, breaking it down into the career pathways, breaking it down into programs of study, and then what are the right people to do the work? And if you go too big, you know, just like I think y'all would agree now after I was talking about this for 2 or 3 hours of what I said at 10 o'clock this morning, we thought we would get into subcommittees because even though y'all have diverse health science backgrounds, I think you all agree that you're not the experts to do the dental hygiene, the dental assisting, the sonography, and the rad tech degree, right? And so that's kind of the elephant you're trying to figure out how to digest.
So I have a question. So this pathways thing, that's a national thing, right? So is there work that other groups have done that we could leverage off of and kind of maybe shortcut some of this? I don't know.
Yeah, and I would have to go take a look, and Elizabeth, maybe you can help out. Dwayne, I know North Carolina's done some work. They really haven't tackled it at the state level. North Carolina is an example. And Diane, you can jump in here as well. North Carolina, they did Perkins projects. We talked about Perkins funding, but at the kind of the beginning of our conversation, they did some projects where they put a little bit of money in each college, and each college developed whatever they wanted to do. And then they tried to just share them at the state level. So we're going at it from a slightly different point of view. But North Carolina's done some of this. Tennessee has done some of this. Trying to think of who else.
Wisconsin.
Yeah, I think Wisconsin has some stuff out there. Gateway College is in Wisconsin. They have some stuff. But, you know, believe it or not, Texas is actually, from the way we're tackling it, we're not maybe the front of the pack, but we're definitely in the pack. And but, you know, and I think one of the takeaways we would hope y'all would do it when we adjourn for the day is you maybe do spend some time Googling about and learning more about career clusters. You know, I'm not trying to tell you what to do tomorrow at work or anything like that, but you know, get a little bit deeper into the conversation, and that's why we try to give you so many different snippets of part of the information. And you know, of course, if we gave you all the other career clusters outside of health science, it's kind of like, okay, I don't know how relevant that is. But that's why we just try to point you to resources. But maybe the next time we come together, whenever y'all decide that is, maybe we can go out there and look at best practices and what other states have done and provide you a level of background information there.
If we can go back to the rehab services part, just so I'm clear, are we looking at doing just the three, PTA, OTA, and rehab, and putting somatic aside for now? Or are we wanting to include somatic in? What was the pleasure of the committee?
I think we were going to hold off on the somatic and see where it fell.
All right, so the rehabilitative services in occupational therapy, physical therapy, and rehab, correct? All right. By my count, that's 10. There's 4 in the first group, 3 in the second group, 3 in the third group. That's progress. It's 10 more than we had this morning, right? All right, so what do we think our next area?
Go to nursing. Oh, we're not going to do nursing.
No.
That's right. Okay.
Yeah. We're supposed to hold off on nursing.
How about health informatics?
Informatics?
Seemed to be a lot.
All right, so we're looking at the area of health informatics. I wonder if that shouldn't.
It's not on this one.
Yeah, that's the question, isn't it?
According to the Perkins Crossway that we have, the clusters and pathways, health informatics, it's one of the pathways within the cluster. of occupation, just reading, just looking at it. And I think Dwayne's just pulled it up right there. It's on the screen. Medical office management, administration, medical records. Are those taught as part of the health sciences or part of your business? Health sciences? Okay.
And, you know, if I can jump in here just a second. You know, and this crosswalk is, you know, it was developed by the Department of Ed, and it tries to bring all of the different systems, the SOC codes, ONET codes, into this model. And, you know, I mean, it's kind of a national model, but we're not locked into it. We don't have to say just because they grouped under where Dwayne is right now, health information, health informatics pathway, where they grouped health medical claims examiner, and then medical administrative executive assistant and medical secretary, which I'm pretty sure we don't have any medical secretary programs at our community colleges. You know, we don't have to follow this exactly. All of these tools are just to help y'all shape this conversation, kind of look at, you know, the stab at how somebody else looked at it, and then you, from your level of expertise, you know, put Lori on the spot over there. Lori is a dean at Hill College. How are my programs structured? And you know, really and truly, I mean, I think this is another one of those elephants in the room. You know, I mean, there's a certain amount of programs at community colleges are going to have to evolve as we go down this road, right? I mean, and so, you know, what does that evolution look like? I mean, and that's part of y'all's conversation as we lay this out for you.
My opinion is the career pathway clusters are too broad. If we're looking at programs of study, we need to look at the programs that are comparable. And that, if we look at those are so broad that they're adding all kinds of things in together, that if you try to get them to work together, they'd be going, no, where's the commonality? So to me, we need to look at the actual programs, and because we're all working in it at some point in time, so we know an idea of where they come together. You know, to me, one that would come together with some of these assistants, when you're looking at health and medical services, health services, allied health, general, medical clinical assistant, and even the mental and social health services. Those have a commonality because they're all into assistance services. And then laboratory services, and then pharmaceutical services. And then the rest of them are pretty specific. So that's my opinion.
Ms. Mosley, could you repeat those that you just mentioned?
Okay, assistant services is all I could come up with a name. The health and medical administrative services.
But don't you think that because of the number of programs across, you can see there 123, aren't they clumping HIM in that?
I'm sure they
Yes.
do.
And they're on a path of evolution right now nationally as well. I think combining, they should probably stand alone, in my opinion, because they're so huge.
Okay.
Medical transcription I mean, that doesn't exist anymore. Informatics is based on who is talking about informatics. It's a different animal to each of us. So health and information management, medical billing, coding, I think that is a very proliferate, it's a very popular program, I mean, among all the colleges represented here. So, and they have, again, they're talking master's level for entry at the national level right now, so.
Dwayne, can you pull this chart back up, the program list? Because I think that's what you were working off of, isn't that correct?
Yeah.
Tell us.
That seems to be what everybody was working off of, right?
But on this one, it's showing that these are AASs and certs. That's where the majority of, in fact, the majority of them are certs, not AASs and not going above. Now, there is an area, I agree, that goes above it, but I don't know that this particular area is there. So what does the group think? That's what I'm looking at. So, do you think health and medical administrative services would be an assistive services? Okay. Health services, allied health, health sciences general? Yes, no? Medical clinical assistant? That's an assistive services. They get a lot into everything. Anywhere from charting to, they do EKGs, they do all kinds of things, so, clerks, yeah. So. And then the mental health, social health services, allied professionals. Those are the ones that I question because.
I see the health and medical administrative services. Not necessarily delivering the care.
No, the support services.
Supporting it, so I would separate
So make
that
those,
from medical clinical assistant.
so make those support services and then those others assisted services. Okay. Supportive. Well, if you take those, then the only ones under clinical assistant, or only ones under assistive would be the medical clinical assistant.
I see this as in.
So, yeah, they could go there.
Or maybe, or should,
What do you group think? I don't know what they do.
Okay. What if we do this? Because Gary was pointing out that because of all that has to be done, there's a timeline. And only so many committees can be convened in the beginning to start this process anyhow. So we limit ourselves to just a few. Right? So we limit ourselves to the 3 that we've identified already and 1 or 2 more. And we were talking, and we thought perhaps a good idea would be to go back to the EMT because it's a very large group. And it also is something that's addressed at the secondary level. And medical assisting, because it's also something that's addressed at the secondary level. And that then gives us a link between the secondary level and the 2-year colleges as well.
okay.
That sound okay? So we go with the 3 that we've identified, so we don't get bogged down in this discussion about what health information management and that area is and who belongs where. But we kind of focus on 5 groups here and then kind of flesh out what those committees should look like and go forward from that. Is everybody okay with that? Comments, questions? Go ahead. Yep.
Well, the previous 3 that we discussed, the diagnostic medical imaging, dental services, rehabilitative services, EMT, and medical assistant, CNA/medical assistant.
And I think in the EMT, we're talking about EMT paramedic, because we're talking about a pathway there. So they do EMT at high school, and they come to the 2-year colleges for the paramedic, AAS, et cetera.
Well, together, it's called EMSP, Emergency Medical Services Providers, or programs.
So would there be subcommittees for the ones that are remaining later on, or is that the plan?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Would there be subcommittees for the remaining? There are several other professions, programs that are left.
Yeah, what Gary was saying is that basically all TATCB can handle is one group at a time. And what we've got with the committees that we've identified here, we've got enough to keep us busy for a while until our next meeting to put the next group together. And so we could just do rolling meetings where we put subcommittees together as we go forward in groups, and stay just ahead of TATCB so they could schedule those and get those in, make them, get them set up, et cetera. Is that right, Gary?
Well, and yes, I mean, there's a certain amount of planning that's going to have to go into this process. And what I suggested to Don and Wanda is it seemed like there seems to be a whole lot of conversation of trying to figure out how to slice and dice this and move forward. And you know, we know this conversation needs to occur. But maybe if you pick out a few, as you've done, and then let's try to get those started, that might help shape your decisions about the next ones. And you know, Lori kind of a couple of minutes ago said that they're too big at this level. We need to work at this level, and maybe there's a certain amount of that that piece needs to be tackled. And I think I said this at the beginning. You know, that this committee's established for 4 years by rule. And, you know, we think there's a lot of work that will be done here. So we're not going to get it done today, but, you know, y'all need to figure out how you're going to move forward. I was just trying to, you know, get some options. If you want to go ahead and try to get them all grouped today, you know, I mean, you can do that. But, you know, and then I think a comment like, it's probably a relevant conversation, like LVN is an example. That's probably a standalone group that will just, you know, you could maybe convene and bring in. Maybe LVN could have a conversation about CNA. You know, I'm not presupposing, but that's just kind of some avenues, and then we'll get busy. And you know, just the math of this, y'all. If, depending on where you go today, if we get back and we start going through some kind of nomination process and trying to find all the people with y'all's help, you know, as a group you've identified, then as we bring the subcommittees together, the good news is the subcommittees don't have to go to our boards for approval. It's just an appointment process. And then we can convene them. So we're probably 60 days from the earliest possible meeting date anyway. And if you have 4 groups as an example, that's a meeting a week for a month. And then maybe if you reschedule this group, you know, sometime after that to meet and have a conversation and debrief, and then that might help your next steps, your best practices, if you will, of how to move forward. But that's just kind of my thinking. Y'all can figure out how to slice, dice.
And I think if we limit ourselves to focusing on these groups, we may find out that our thought processes on grouping together, it may turn out dental hygiene or dental services is 3 completely different groups that just don't talk together well in that first subcommittee meeting. We may learn that, right? We come back to the next meeting, we can talk about then how better to address that group, right? We may find the same thing with the imaging people. You know, it seems like a natural fit to me, but I'm not in imaging, so maybe it's not. But if we get them together, the communities of interest together in a subcommittee to talk about that process, then we will know whether or not it's something that should be together and move forward with that group, or if we need to readjust. What we need to do is to nail down exactly what a subcommittee, I keep saying committee, a subcommittee is going to look like. So that when we leave here today, we know what we're looking for in the community to bring in here, and how to charge them. And we only have an hour, less than an hour and a half left to do that. So if we go forward with this other discussion, we're not going to get that far.
I would just have for future, not now, but just the ones we were struggling with, the health and medical administrative services, there's a lot of programs in there, as well as the mental and social health services. If maybe the staff could kind of help us understand more of some of the programs that are in there, because I think we were struggling on where do we categorize it, and that probably maybe even goes into a couple different groups, but not for now. I get what you're saying, but just for future may be helpful.
And I think that's something we can educate ourselves on, because we can all go back to our places and say, hey, what is this area? What do you see in this area? And granted, at your college you may have HIM, but at another college they have something else that fits into that that you're unaware of. So, we need to try to educate ourselves as much as we can on that also.
We can pull up the ONET descriptions of the SIP code almost immediately if there's something you'd like for us to look at. Okay. And we can broadcast it from the computer.
You look like you could use a break. So let's take 10 minutes.
Yes.
And we'll be back at, it's 1:36, and we'll be back at 1:46.
he ended up with hand, foot, and mouth.
Okay, we need to reconvene. First task, I need to ask for a motion to approve the 5 that we've decided on, the 5 subcommittees. Diagnostic medical imaging, dental services, rehabilitative services, EMSP, and medical assisting.
I second. Are you waiting for a second? Yes, you move.
Okay, we have a
Sue-Ann?
motion to approve the 5 subcommittees that we just defined, and we have a second to that motion. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All oppose?
One correction, I just, for clarity purposes, CMA, it seems to be a profession by itself, so if you're including CNA and other services in there, I don't, just a clarity, just for my own clarity, when you say CMA, is it just medical assisting, or does it include certified nurses assistants?
Just medical assisting.
Thank you. I also vote for it, yes.
Okay. The ayes have it.
All right, and so the next thing, since we have 5 subcommittees approved now, we need 5 members from this committee to serve on those subcommittees, 1 for each.
Don, at least one. I mean.
At least one, yes. At least one. Yes. And, yes, ma'am, go ahead. We have 2 volunteers for medical assisting.
And you can volunteer as many times as you want, and I told you that other word earlier, voluntoed, but yeah, you can sign up for as many trips to Austin as you want, I guess.
I'll volunteer for the dental.
All right, we have a volunteer for the dental.
The committee members will chair the subcommittees, and just as we put Don and Wanda on the spot, we will we will help with the prep work, or we will put together whatever you tell us to do within reason. I can't think of a reason why we would, if you send us a 400-page document and say print 30 copies of this, I think we're going to question that. Is that the best use of state resources? But it's really more of support. And of course, we spent better part of 2 hours or more today just trying to get up to speed about the conversation we're having. When the subcommittees come together, there's going to have to be a certain amount of that. And we will probably still take on that role, but then hopefully you will take it from there and build upon it and begin to blend the discipline-specific, if that's appropriate, expertise into our conversation. Because we kind of started our conversation from a global education speak point of view, and then y'all begin to blend health science into it. And so now we're trying to get it down to the smaller level. But then your task would be to really and truly get those subcommittees up and running and down to work as quickly as possible. And then you will come back to this committee and report out on the subcommittees. And so whatever the subcommittee does, produces at some time in the future, you'll bring that back to this.
Gary, I have a question. Can Don or I serve on the subcommittees? Yes? Okay. I'll do medical assisting.
I would like to be on the EMPS, is that right? Because sometimes those people transition into nursing.
It might be wise to have 2 people from this advisory committee on each of the subcommittees. In the event that one person can't make it, we still have somebody to chair the meeting.
Don, I'd like to serve also on the Dental Services Committee with you. And actually, I'd also be interested in rehab services.
Olga.
Yes, I'll volunteer for the also EMT, EMSP, and the rehabilitation services.
Since no one took radiology, medical imaging, so I'll do imaging, yes. I don't know what I'm signing up for, but yeah.
You know, y'all are volunteering a lot now. I mean, this morning I couldn't even hardly get a volunteer sideways.
They saw that nobody died, so they're okay with it.
Actually, you fed us.
And I'd volunteer for the EMT one as well. Yeah, for EMT.
Okay. For the minute queen here, who is doing the radiology, the diagnostic one? And Michelle.
Abe Johnson.
Okay. What about dental?
Me.
Yeah, okay. Helga. Okay, I got that one. Rehab services. Okay, at EMSP, I've got Evangeline and Sally and Jan. And, okay, that was, oh, EMS. Okay, medical assisting? Boo, okay, I think I have it. And Shirley, yes. Okay, got it.
You have Wanda,
Or
the last
medical, no.
Wanda Johnson.
Okay, thank you.
All right, can we read those back so everybody knows who's doing what?
Okay, on diagnostic medical imaging, I have, let's see, Abe and Michelle, is that right? Okay, dental services, Carol and Helga. And rehab services, Helga and Evangeline. And EMSP, that's a big one, Evangeline, Sally, Jan, and Donna. Is that right? Did I miss anybody on that one? Okay, and then on medical assisting would be Lou, Shirley, and Wanda. Did I miss anybody for any committee? Good, thanks.
Anybody else want to jump in on one of those?
I'll join the medical imaging.
Any others? Yeah. I think we pretty much got everybody on something, right? All right. So the next question is, do we want to just say 24 members per subcommittee? And the reason I throw this out there is because we've identified 8 communities of interest. We're going to have at least one person from each community of interest. That's 8 slots filled, plus however many slots we just filled with advisory committee members. And we still need to be able to get, like the EMSP, emergency medical tech, and paramedic. There are 49 AAS programs. If we limit this to, say, 12 subcommittee members, then we pretty much fill their committee without giving anyone outside a very select group an opportunity to participate. So,
Don, we're limited by statute to 24, And just like, I don't think, and Pam, we didn't get 24 on this, did we initially?
No, we have 21.
Because we were trying to keep balance between community, not balance, but we wanted emphasis on the community college side because it's required of the community colleges, and so there needs to be adequate representation of community college while still keeping the business industry and the secondary groups. So, but we are limited by 24. So what we do, like in the EMT stuff, is we will try to reach out to all schools, 49 programs, as you said, and if all 49 nominate, then we try to look at as much diversity as we can, geographic and other kind of things, of trying to reach as much of the state as we can. And, quite honestly, as an example, and maybe I shouldn't do Alamo, but we have Del Mar represented on the larger committee, and so maybe if we have lots of stuff down in South Texas, we might exclude Del Mar just as an example, because we're trying to get as broad as possible, and that's just kind of the way we try to do the process. Well,
is that, worries me a little bit.
well, and that's
Only because I feel that that's the content expert, that's all.
right. And maybe that is a conversation that we might have to have later, is, as long as we have at least one person from the committee on each one of the subcommittees, that's fine. But then if we do have an abundance of nominations, but maybe let's do an example where I don't know, if I didn't try to get all your willingness to serve recorded. I think Pam got it, and you recorded it. But let's, for example, if we had 22 nominations and 2 of you volunteered, then we would probably just take the 22 and the 2, and collectively that puts us at 24. And so that's, I think I've said this many times today, the purpose is for this to be as inclusive as possible while keeping in the bounds of state statute. We're certainly not trying to willingly exclude or anything else.
Yeah, and that's why I think we should talk about, with the 8 communities of interest that we have identified as the groups to serve on the subcommittees. Should we say that at least one member from each of those groups should be included in the committee? I guess so long as they can be identified, because there may be some of the smaller programs in the future where we can't get somebody from one of those groups, right? Say at least one person from each of those communities of interest be included in the subcommittee, and then say up to 24 members on the subcommittee. So one of the problems we're going to have is, like, I'm looking at sonography. We only have 24 programs. If this comes to the point where we break sonography out because we find that imaging doesn't work and we say they have to have 24 members, well, we may not be able to fill 24 members in areas that have fewer programs. So maybe we say up to 24 members, but we must include one of each of the communities of interest, one member of each community of interest. What do you think of that? Yeah, so we need some way to say that, right? How do we say that? How do we say we will make our best attempt to get one from each of the communities of interest?
Say it's that at least one member of the identified communities of interest be part of the subcommittee. So that leaves a little wiggle room.
Okay, so what I've got is, it is strongly recommended that at least one member of each of the communities of interest be included in the subcommittee. Yes, no, maybe? Yeah, and I think that's why we're going with the strongly recommended, because it may not be possible. Some of them are going to be kind of small. How many medical assisting programs do we have? There's only 10 AAS and 22 Cert 1s. There's only 41 total. So it may be difficult to bring 24 people in, right? It may be difficult to find representatives from different programs, from the different areas, so.
And, you know, I know y'all probably know this, it's highly possible, and I would even go to the point of being probable, as I look at the chart up there, as Don just said, there's 10 AASs in medical assisting and 22 certs. There's probably 10 of those certs that are nested in that AAS.
Mm-hmm.
And so you really don't have a number of 32 as a population. You really have a population of 22.
Well, once we get into all these communities of interest, I mean, there are a lot of people in the employer side and, you know, diverse population outside of the numbers we're seeing here, I understand.
Are you calling the communities of interest those 8 groups that we said? Or
Yes, ma'am.
the community colleges?
It's the 8 groups that we identified earlier.
Okay. What I would like to add to that there needs, the rest of it should be filled by a combination of community colleges, and, because I think they should be represented more on the groups, because they're the ones that are going to be teaching. Maybe not all of those people, but the majority of them.
There's been a comment a couple of weeks ago that perhaps the majority should be made of business, because business and industry, because after all, you're preparing students and to align with the knowledge, skills, and abilities that will be required in the workplace.
Well, I agree that that's an important part, but they don't always understand the educational concept. So there has to be some balance.
And I will, from an operational point of view, we will probably approach it from a plurality, to where that the community colleges represent the biggest group, and then secondary needs to be included, business, industry, and then perhaps other licensing experts and that kind of stuff, whoever we can get to the table. But each one of these is going to be, you know, the individual recipe for Coke. And so as discussed, you know, if we get 12 in a particular area, we'll have to kind of figure out what we get. But hopefully we won't get down to the point of we're voting and hands up or hands down, and we're highly divided on sides and stuff like that. We're really looking for consensus improvement and those kind of things. We're not looking for just sheer force of numbers, who gets the most votes. So yes, I agree. Balance, representation, all of these are factors, and we'll work with y'all when we get all these nominations in, and you know, we won't just, you know, 12 business and industry people that have never served on an advisory committee at all, and one faculty member, and say, hey, scribe this down, will you? You know, I mean, yeah, that's not where we're going.
I agree with Lori that business and industry, they know what they want out of our graduates. They don't necessarily know what other bosses we have to serve as far as our accrediting agencies, licensure, all this other stuff. They want this, but I think we know better what the student has to have in order to be successful.
Yeah, the big difference between the which was the other program of study that you talked about, architect, they may not have as much of a prescriptive accrediting and all those other things. So there, the business and industry becomes, their voice should be higher, as opposed to in health sciences, it's pretty much standard 1A enlisted.
Well, and quite honestly, as we looked at the 16 career clusters and we figured out, we had conversations about how are we going to do this? How do we begin to implement it? How do we go forward? Obviously, health sciences has huge number of enrollments, and so that was a factor. But then one of the things we discussed was that you have so many different programs that have standards, accreditation, and that kind of stuff, that we know it's going to be a bit painful because some people are going to have to give up their course that has that different word in WECM versus this word in WECM. But we thought that perhaps there might be some low-hanging fruit here that, and Jan, we didn't include nursing in that low-hanging fruit piece. But we think there's some attributes unique to health sciences that we can help to make some progress quickly. And kind of as I related a couple hours ago about when we came together on the 60-hour thing, and one area said, why don't we just all adopt the same courses? And of course, as I told you, I said, yeah, I'm all on board with that, but rather than me do it, y'all do it. And give us the list, and you all sign off on it and agree to it, and we'll fix WECM, And so I think we can make some headway. But yes, those are factors to consider, definitely.
Okay, so makeup of the committee. We're talking about a statement, strongly recommended that at least one member of each of the communities of interest be included in the, I can't read my own writing, in the subcommittee with a membership of up to 24. I think we should put it to a motion, so anybody want to? Any discussion?
Before we moved on, I was just thinking that maybe I should recant my being volunteer for the rehab, just because as I did the numbers, there are lots, and I was already on another subcommittee, and that would allow more people from the other groups. So if that's okay?
So you're wanting to come off of rehab?
Yes, please.
I just want to make sure I took you off the right one.
Yes.
Got a motion and a second.
Because there are a lot of, between OT and PT, there are a lot of programs. By the time you get everybody in, you didn't have another group, so.
Do we have a motion and a second? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right, the motion passes. Let's see, where's my agenda? What else do we need to discuss regarding the makeup of the subcommittees? What questions or comments? Do we have anything to add?
I know that I kind of showed up having looked at the statute, but not that sure about where we were going with this. Could we craft sort of a expectation job description for the committee members so that when they're invited to serve, they have a sense of, what they're being asked to do? I think that may help us in recruiting folks, especially the industry folks will want to know what's the time commitment, how much time do I have to invest in this? Well, I think in the recruiting process.
We will craft a letter very similar to the letter that got all of y'all here, and that went to all the vice presidents, chief academic officers. And so we'll take that letter, just rework it a little bit, and we'll send it to the community colleges, and then we'll also share it with like Diane and others. And then this is where we hope that y'all give us help and guidance on the various groups, because we only need to send the dental letter to the appropriate dental organizations, and I don't know, the one that just popped in my mind, and it's not appropriate for this conversation, but TASTE, the Texas Association of Continuing Educators, or whatever their acronym is. We have contacts at many of those kind of entities, and we'll send it as appropriate. But then once y'all get it, y'all need to share it and make a note, Pam and Elizabeth, that we need to make sure that when we send the nominations, we send it to all the committee members as well. And so that we try to get as big a footprint as we can of trying to get the right people. And quite honestly, one of our weaknesses is business and industry. I mean, we just reaching broad enough, diverse enough to make sure we get that. I mean, and so maybe when you get it at the college level, you send it to your advisory committee members, and then business and industry, maybe you send it. And Jan, I don't know, I think when we sent this to you, I think you actually forwarded it to some people, as I recall. I'm not real sure, but, or maybe we discussed that. But, so trying to get a broad enough spectrum to cast a wide enough net is part of the challenge. And, you know, as Don kind of read the list, and there was conversation, there's 49 programs here. Well, if there are 49 programs, we don't really keep a dean's list and a CTE program coordinator list, but we know who the presidents and vice presidents are, and we cast it that way. But, and you know, part of this is if we cast and we don't catch a fish the first time around, we might need to extend the deadline and try to go back at it again, because, you know, we really want to make sure we get the right groups, you know, not just get 3 people and call it good. But, so that's where help will come in. And, you know, the categories are important, but if you know that John Smith is the national director of whatever, just let us know.
One of the ways that we contact employers of nurses is to ask the program directors to give us information about the settings where their students do clinical practice.
And it was my understanding that the actual rules of the committee, of the subcommittee, are the same as the rules for this committee. So we don't really need to do a whole lot with that.
Yeah, the rules that govern subcommittees are actually in government code, but you know, the charge and stuff doesn't change. You know, you can't go tell them to. I guess you could have them look at ACGM as an example, but as I discussed earlier, they can't change ACGM. Maybe it would be appropriate to have as an example. I was just trying to think of something completely esoteric and out of context. So you probably wouldn't form a subcommittee to go study painting the outside of this building or something. Because I mean, it's not within your scope of work. So there, I agree with the comment a minute ago about trying to have something to help shape them so they understand specifically what they're tasked to do. And I don't know exactly what y'all was thinking. I would think it would be one statement, not individual statements, because if you do individuals for each one, then as you slice and dice further and further in this, you're really going to get down into the weeds. But I think, yes, a statement and expectation of the process, and you know, their committee, their first meeting will go very similar to the way this meeting went, you know, and probably if I gave you the chance of going back to 10 o'clock and getting it, you know, if I gave you a chance to opt out at 10 o'clock, some of you might say, oh my gosh, but I didn't give you that chance. And we won't give them that chance either. But just to help them get started, and you know, it's how fast can we get the boat planed out and get it up and running and get them on task to report back to this group.
I think it would be important to give them a little idea of time commitment too, and if you have to travel, or is it conference calls, or is it meetings here, or kind of some of that may be good, because I know from the employer standpoint that would be, and I'm sure from educators, everybody, to be able to plan.
The meetings would take place here at the coordinating board. The time commitment, that's a difficult one. Perhaps one sitting, 2 meetings. Very, very difficult to say. But I would certainly say, we know that there's a time limit. In 2020, I think, is the date of expiration. That can be as well renewed. So a year, 2 years, I don't know. It's very difficult.
And, but I do think you might could speak to steal from the Supreme Court in Brown 2 versus Board of Education with all deliberate speed and charge, that the goal is to come here and work. And as a general rule, what we try to do when we schedule meetings is as you know, on this one, we started at 10 o'clock in the morning. That generally gives most parts of the state time to get here in the morning. And then if we adjourn at 3, generally speaking, it gives you the opportunity of getting back home in a day. I went to a meeting recently in El Paso, and I flew into El Paso and out of El Paso in the same day. And it made for a very long day, but Austin is centralized here. But so yes, we are sensitive to that. I think if we get the right people on the committee, as kind of was discussed earlier, that a lot of the colleges have already done a lot of this work, and many colleges have pathway initiatives. The challenge is we have courses out there. I don't know, A, B, C, D, 1301 and 1302 that are literally subsets of each other, nested Venn diagrams. And which one are we going to give up? I think if we get down into those conversations, that might really stall us. But I think as we begin to really talk about it from a business point of view, knowledge, skills, and ability, and then, some of those things we might just have to rely on frequency and usage data and that kind of stuff. And then part of that will go back to the WECM leadership group about, is there a way to net those 2 courses into one and do no harm, if you will. I mean, obviously somebody's going to have to change their catalog, but that's back to one of those things about building this plane as we're flying it. We really haven't decided that process yet. And part of it, y'all are going to help shape that as a conversation, if you will, of how do we get there.
If you look at the PowerPoint that they gave us this morning on page 4, the POS advisory committees, there's actually the first 2 bullets and the sub-bullet are really good. That looks like a good guideline to me for the subcommittees. A good place to start. It starts with the Programs of Study Advisory Committee shall develop a POS curricula specific to nationally recognized career clusters. And then down to advise the board regarding program of study curricula and provide board staff feedback about the processes and procedures related to the curricula. And I think that's what we're talking about, trying to give them an idea of what they're doing. So we need to change some wording because they're not an advisory committee, they're a subcommittee. But I think that really, I think it's a good place for them. And instead of advise the board, they would be reporting to us. So we would say advise the advisory committee or report to the advisory committee, or what would we say?
That is correct. They would create a document, and then they would submit that document to this committee. And this committee, in turn, would review that document and, in turn, submit it to the coordinating board and we would also post it in the Texas Register for comments, I believe, unless.
Now, before we would post it, it comes back here.
Yeah.
Okay, okay. I don't know if. Right. So somehow or another, there needs to be what they considered, what they looked at, and you know, each of you, not each of you, but as we know, we have volunteers that will represent this committee. When you report out, I think you'll summarize what they considered, what they looked at, what were the challenges, opportunities, if you will, and then the sequence of courses that they recommended, and kind of how that merges with a crosswalk, if you will, of the knowledge, skills, and abilities. And I'm not real sure how tangible that document really needs to be, but as I said at the beginning of this, it's not just a WECM course review process. It's really more of a broader, and I think Stolly has kind of emphasized this point a couple of times, of from a business and industry point of view, of this is what we need. And then I think there's been some conversation of, yeah, but this is how you get there. And so a marriage of those two processes is what we're looking at. And so I think it's a sequence of courses. I think perhaps WECM, additions, deletions, archiving, some of those kind of things could be in your charge to them. And then other things as appropriate. Certifications. We've talked about licensures, and obviously many of these programs are licensure specific, but then also industry certifications, third-party certifications might be relevant in some cases to for the subcommittees to bring back. You know, not this discipline, but computer science, as an example, has lots of certifications that might be appropriate. And so I think those are the kind of things you should charge them to consider, and that should be the guiding effort of their work. And if you have any other things in that category, and you know, I don't think it has to be a big narrative. I think just bullet points would.
I just wanted to mention that at the Architecture and Construction Program of Study meeting that took place, what the committee, one of the things that the committee decided upon was, rather than a charge per se for the subcommittees, they provided a task objective for them, at least for the first meeting, until we could come up with a formal charge specifically for all the subcommittees. And basically it was stated as, the initial subcommittee meeting will identify areas of study, needs for industry, and particular skill sets that they want students to learn. So just as an FYI, that was how they determined the subcommittee's first task should be.
And if appropriate, you can just steal from architecture and construction.
Heck, yeah.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
All right, we need something to say.
Well, in order for this not to be so overwhelming for the subcommittee, especially the first time they meet, I am perfectly fine with adopting what you just read and making it specific to these subcommittees. Otherwise, yeah, I was trying to think of how to put that, but you're right. They'd be all over the map, you know. And this way, gives them a task, a very specific task that first time for the first meeting, and then they can evolve and branch out with each successive meeting.
Other comments? It looks like the other comments are all, yeah, let's do that. Okay, well, I guess we'll need to get a copy of that so we can actually make sure it gets in our notes. Does everybody remember what was said?
Yes, please.
The objective for the subcommittees was for the initial subcommittee meeting to identify the areas of study, needs from industry, and particular skill sets they want students to learn.
If I didn't speak up, I guess. One difference from that group to this group is that each of the not per se the accrediting, but the credentialing organizations has already done the knowledge skills part. So regionally relevant new skills might be added, I agree, from one area to another area, rural hospital versus teaching hospital, that sort of thing. But so I don't think it can follow exactly that way. I think that gives us a guideline, but some of that stuff is already done for many of the programs. The mapping of all the listed competencies to courses, all of those are directors already have them. And so the only input from the business and industry, I would say, is that if there's any gap in there that needs to be addressed. So there's still room for them, but not as much of a room as in the case of that program of study. I mean, do you all agree, or?
I think you should keep it a little vague because, I mean, I know we've got our licensure and our accreditation groups, but, I mean, is it ever appropriate to maybe question some of that? That maybe practice is a little bit different or it may change? I just put it out there. I don't know. I mean, I understand that you got to follow that. Okay. Well, but even with the changing, with health reform, things like that, are there things out there that we might want to put out there?
I want to say one thing about that. I think what is missing on the side of the employers, on the industry side, is they don't always understand that our charge at the two-year college is to bring these students to a level where they can actually function as an entry-level employee, and their minimum skills is what we're looking for. And those minimum skills are laid out in the credentialing exams and in the crosswalks that go along with those. And that's really what we're charged with. And the employers want somebody to come out with these additional skills. And so that's where the employers come into this and saying, okay, well, these are the skills that they really need in addition to what they need to pass the exam that they're not getting. And that's where I see the employers coming into this.
Also, the continuation of accreditation and plus performance funding requires that we have graduates not only gainful employment, but they also pass credentialing exam. Exam pass rate's a very important thing. So I don't think we can go away from having to teach them to not teach to the test, but teach them to be able to be successful in the credentialing exam. That cannot be off the table at all for any of the programs that we were talking about. But at the same time, I do see, Sally, I actually do see some differences, and their WECM curriculum has enough room to add additional SLOs to address some of those issues, yes.
If I could offer, I mean, between what Don said and then what Abe just said, I think y'all almost modified the statement that Elizabeth said, that you could maybe put something like in consultation with business and industry, review, consider whatever licensing accreditation standards as appropriate, and then take the statement almost from there and finish it out, couldn't you? Because I mean, you've kind of added that piece about we understand their standards are already here. We want business and industry, because I think that kind of goes at what Sally said about, are all of these standards really relevant? And maybe business and industry could offer emphasis. I mean, I know it's one thing if you have to teach a standard, but they could say, well, that's very important or that's minimal. And so I think just a little bit of modification, as I suggested, you know.
I'd like to add, a lot of conversations that we've had in our region where we have business and industry talking with higher ed and secondary parties is more in regards to soft skills and students being ready to come into college, being ready to come into the workplace. So I'm not sure that business and industry would say more specific skills to that, to sonography or those specifics, but more so what the employability skills are, more so coming from the HR directors saying, you know, you can't be on your cell phone, you need to dress a certain way. So those are the kind of things that I think you're going to hear from business and industry, not so specific to skills.
I agree. We had an example, not from our college, thank God, but business industry in the office, and it was office assistant, and they didn't know how to put a stamp on, or where to put a stamp. So, I mean, it's those things that we take for granted, that they're the ones saying, they come in there. I love that commercial with the young man on his cell phone showing all those pictures from Facebook where he was drunk and everything. And he says, you do realize you're applying for a job, right? So, I mean, the soft skills are very, very important. But I think it's a matter of we have to start somewhere and then bring it all together. I mean, I don't know that you could bring everything together in one meeting. That would go back to that overwhelming type thing. But we have to educate we have to listen to the business industry as to what they want, but then we also have to educate them as to what the regulatory bodies say. You know, that goes back into nursing. With LVN, some places want LVNs to do a lot more past their scope of practice. Well, then that's what we call on the Board of Nursing, say, hey, help. And so, you know, we have to get them together at the same table.
It is true that there's more focus now on non-technical skills that the graduates today don't have, and we're going to work that into our decks, so be sure you tell Rex when he's around.
Yeah, and there's two things here, I think. We have to start somewhere, right? And wherever we start, we're going to end up changing it because it's brand new, right? It's brand new for everybody, so we're going to end up making changes. So we need to start pretty simple, and this is pretty simple. And the second thing is we have 25 minutes, and at 10 after 3, I've got a shuttle to catch. So.
But I think we need to put somewhere in there that we are looking at sequencing courses and we are looking at defining just the definition of program of study. Defined set of academic, career, and technical courses organized in a coherent sequence. That's what we're trying to do across the board.
So we're talking about reviewing standards, content, industry skills, and identifying gaps, right? That's what we're talking about. And the industry, their biggest role in this is going to be, in my view, identifying the gaps, telling us where we're not hitting the mark now, right? Is that what we're talking about? Right. Yes, this is the task for the first meeting.
It's a very important. It's a very important piece. In fact, we've talked about having a representative from secondary as well on the subcommittee. So each subcommittee would have a representative from secondary or from TEA. Right, to have that alignment. Right.
I do have a question. Are we concerned more with the gaps or the commonalities?
Well, and I was going to say, let's, and I think this is the point you're making, let's not maybe presuppose the conversation that there are gaps, but maybe talk about kind of globally of kind of like a SWOT analysis, if you will, but strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, that kind of stuff. Because I think the majority of our programs, even there are duplication in WECM, I think every program has strengths. They probably have a few opportunities. And I think if we phrase it more like that, because if we phrase it as gaps, that almost presupposes that.
And maybe that's what we need to say. Maybe what we need to say is the subcommittee first task is to perform a SWOT of the block of courses which progress in content specificity. And that's a hard word to say, right? But maybe that's what we need to say, right? Subcommittees need to perform a SWOT analysis on their content area, right? But we should probably say it a better way.
In the interest of you making your shuttle, Don, I mean, if we seem to have quite a few different, more phrases, whatever, and I don't know if you're going to try to get one final phrase, or if you want, we could probably do this by email, of kind of capture a sentence, and we could wordsmith it as a committee before we get these groups together, and then that gives you a few minutes to talk about next steps and anything else to wrap.
Could we discuss the resources that you felt would be required for the next meeting?
Yeah, I think that's our next step. All right. So resources for the next meeting. We need a room.
And that might be a bit of a question you don't know the answer to right now. But we pointed you towards a lot of stuff. There was, Sally, I think you suggested something earlier, and it eludes me now of exactly what it was. But hopefully we have it in the minutes about staff bring more information about something. And, we're certainly, our job is to help you move forward. And so if you know of specific stuff, let us know, and we'll add it to the list now, but you can always email us prior to the meeting. Maybe I should say hopefully a couple of days before the next meeting. Emailing it that morning might be, but oftentimes groups like this, they start developing their own spreadsheets and stuff like that, and say, will you make copies available of everything? So we can certainly do that, and if you know of any specific things you'd like to know more about, we can certainly take that on and put those kind of resources together for you. I mean, we can probably talk about career clusters for 3 hours if you want, but.
So probably the most important thing we have to do right now is decide when our next meeting will be. And what are we looking at? Are we looking at 3 meetings a year? What do we think? 4 meetings a year? 2 meetings a year? We can't do one because we had one and we got a lot left to do, so.
So at one point, we talked about having subcommittees report back to us. Are we meeting in parallel, or should we try and stagger and have certain, like 2 subcommittee meetings and then a meeting for ourselves or something like that?
That may be ideal. That may be ideal, because we come back to a meeting next month, we wouldn't know what we were talking about because we hadn't got any feedback yet, right? Yeah, that's probably the best plan.
So I think we're really ideally or realistically looking toward the fall, after September and October.
Yeah, you're going to have a hard time scheduling subcommittees in the summer anyhow because so many people are gone. So you probably won't even have the first subcommittee meeting until fall.
And obviously just the nomination process is probably going to take the better part of 60 days more or less, and that gets us into, end of mid-August, because today's the 21st, so if it is 60 days, that gets us to August 21st. That's when y'all are starting back to school and all that kind of stuff, and so that's not a good time. That's when we send all the emails about you have to do this by Friday. We send it that. Not really, but obviously there are some windows and hurdles that I think we all have a level of awareness about. But so let's do the nomination process and get that piece. We can communicate via email, but I think as Pam said, perhaps an October meeting that kind of assumes we could get all the nomination stuff done and have a bunch of meetings in September, and then come back and have, y'all could update, those of you on those subcommittees could provide updates and then figure out next steps. And so maybe just.
Yeah, so maybe we should just kind of generally commit to a meeting in October. And everybody just kind of be aware that may be when it's going to happen. And then we can kind of adjust our schedules accordingly. All right? Everybody in agreement? Okay. So I want to ask you, we tentatively set a date.
The deans and directors? Oh, okay.
Do y'all want to tentatively set a date in October?
I know a few of you do.
No? Yes.
How many of you attend TCCIL? That's the first week of October, right, Lori? And so that kind of gets rid of the first week of October, and we just got rid of the second week of October. So the okay, everybody save the fourth week of October before somebody else takes it.
This sounds like something we ought to do by email. Everybody in agreement? All right, so we'll set our next meeting by email. But we're going to look towards, I guess, the first week of November. If that doesn't work, then we're probably looking at January. All right. Anything else? Any other questions or comments?
Either Gary or Pam, so now we have our meeting coming after the subcommittee meeting. Can you kind of give us a rough timeline for us in different subcommittees, what the timeline and next steps and so on and so forth?
Rough is, it depends. If the subcommittees come together and they really put together something quickly, as I alluded to the 60-hour workshop where a discipline kind of said, why don't we just do this? And they roll up their sleeves. I've talked about programs of study and fields of study. We had, there was a Mexican-American studies field of study that was developed some time ago. We reconvened that group. They met for an afternoon. They made a few changes and said, this is our recommendation, and that's going to the board. And so just really, it depends on the groups and how much they're willing to meet. You know, if you had a group that came together and said, hey, we have a national conference, you know, this weekend, let's do this on Thursday, Friday, after the conference, before the conference, whatever, and they all reached a level of consensus, you know, maybe that's something we could take and then move forward. And so to speculate is really difficult, but I think as Elizabeth kind of said, and you know, a couple of questions from business and industry about how much time. As a general rule, our committees meet 4 times a year, you know, quarterly, but then it really depends on progress that's made. Because I know y'all don't want to come to Austin just for nothing, and you know, believe it or not, we actually do have jobs and we actually do try to accomplish stuff. And when we get together, we need to do work and we need to make the time relevant and valuable and all that kind of stuff. And so it's too early in the process to come up with any kind of timeline, but I would tell you just kind of my personal, I don't think this committee is going to be done in 2 years. I think there's too much work. I think maybe with planning, we can find a way to accomplish a lot of stuff next summer, perhaps. Maybe that's optimism on my part. But now that y'all know the conversation, if we divide more subcommittees, do more nominations, maybe next summer we'll get them together, and then next fall really have several. But that's just, you know, me thinking, not giving you a roadmap by any means. But so that wasn't much of an answer, but it's the best answer I've got right now.
I guess if there's nothing else, we're done. Anything else?
I'll move to adjourn.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? We're done. Thank you.